Hey everybody, Sol here. I have only one rule here. If it's animated, I'll comment on it. 2 words. Final Fantasy. I'm sure the majority of you watching right now just had your neurons light up just at the mere mention of it, and I'm right up there with you. But what the hell can I even say about the Final Fantasy series as a whole? It's one of the most popular video game series of all time, with more iterations than there are hairs on Donald Trump's head, making more money than some country's entire annual GDP, and having legions of loyal and devoted followers that span multiple generations. Sure, the series has had its ups, its downs, downs, but the majority of the series reflects an adherence to quality, creativity, and inviting us into a world of fantasy that's both fun and enjoyable. In video games. For whatever reason, though, that world of fun and enjoyability seems to stop dead at the border between video game land and animation land. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure why, but Final Fantasy, when it decides to go animated, it churns out some really odd results. And that's what we're going to be doing this entire month of February. We're going to be looking at the animated Final Fantasy iterations. Some of them are movies, some of them are anime. But I want you to get ready for this big fucking Final Fantasy fest that I'm going to call Final February, with a look at Final Fantasy Legend of the Crystals. But first, a little history. Final Fantasy Legend of the Crystals is an OVA series that was directed by Rintaro, produced by Madhouse, and released in Japan in 1994 as 4 30-minute OVAs. The series itself is a direct sequel to the Super Famicom game Final Fantasy V, taking place 200 years after the original story. You got all that? Well, fantastic, because it's time to grab our Moogles, we're gonna style our hair, and we're gonna cry ourselves to sleep as we take a look at the first animated Final Fantasy iteration, Final Fantasy Legend of the Crystals. For those of you who have played Final Fantasy V sometime in your life, this plot synopsis may sound eerily familiar. On the planet R, yeah I know, some name, right? There are 4 crystals of earth, wind, fire, and water, which maintain the balance of the world and prevent catastrophes from befalling the land. When the crystals of earth, water, and fire are stolen by a mysterious entity whose name I can't pronounce, a descendant of Bartz, the protagonist from the original game, is called upon to defend the crystal of the wind from harm and ultimately to save the world. Now, I'm gonna go on record right away and say that I've never actually played Final Fantasy V, but I am familiar with the characters and the story to a certain degree. And, from what I know, this plot is basically just a watered-down version of the original plot. But instead of having a whole 60-plus hour game to flesh out everything, it has to get crammed into a measly 2-hour runtime. Needless to say, there are some serious amounts of plot diarrhea, to the point where it feels like huge chunks of the story are missing. But just going by the merits of the series itself, this entire thing can be summed up with one simple word. Meh. Now, usually in this situation where the plot is either bad or just totally boring, I hold out hope for the characters to be more engaging. And to be perfectly honest, I don't know why I keep doing that, because I always end up constantly disappointed. So this time, I'm gonna take a look at the characters without any hope whatsoever. Maybe I'll spare myself some heartbreak if I do. For the protagonist, we've got, No, is it him? Her? I don't know, it's hard to say. Well, I'm just gonna go with her, because, again, meh. This here is Lenali, a descendant of Bartz who is tasked with finding the Crystal of the Wind. I would like to say more about her, honest, but I'm finding myself at a complete loss of any coherent analysis, since Lenali's entire purpose is basically just to do this. Needless to say, it gets on your nerves pretty fast. Next, there's Pretz, a headstrong young man with a crush on Lena Lee, who's basically the afterbirth of every typical shonen action hero ever conceived, in that he never thinks things through, is stubborn as all fuck, and speaks most of his dialogue at the volume of trying to talk on a cell phone while standing underneath a hovering helicopter. Other than that, there's not a damn thing to say about him. And that's fine, I suppose. Spares me the shittiness. As for the side characters, you got Valkis, an aggressive and silly man who's general of the Tycoon Air Force and commander of the Iron Wing, Rouge, a conniving sky pirate who enjoys shiny things and showing off more skin than a museum run by Buffalo Bill, and Mid, the grandson of Sid from the original game and the only returning character from Final Fantasy V, who returns as a spirit in order to retrieve the stolen brain of his grandfather Shido. Yes, it's just as weird as it sounds. I wish there was more to say about all these guys, but with such limited time to do anything in this series, they mostly just end up being awkward and stereotyped, with no real sense of camaraderie between any of them. And that's disappointing, since a big part of the Final Fantasy franchise's appeal is the interaction between party members. Well, that and angst. Anyway, it's time to move on to what makes this series good. What I mean by that is, let's talk about the one and only thing some people might find mildly enjoyable. I know I'm taking a real blasé attitude towards this series, and I do apologize, but I had to rack my brain so hard to find even one good thing to say about it. I don't stand against it out of any personal grudge or anything, it's just genuinely awful. Except for this. And that one thing is, this series is just fucking weird. In an amusing way, though. A major part of this series' appeal is just seeing what kind of crazy shit is gonna happen next. It's not the craziest shit to ever happen in an anime, and honestly I think Furikuri was way weirder than this, but it's more just the idea of it. After all, Final Fantasy is a franchise that carries itself with a certain dignity. Sure, it has its fair share of silliness, but the majority of the games in the mainline have a poise and pride that signify a narrative that is at least trying to be taken seriously. This series does not have that in any way, shape, or form. I mean, how can you take something seriously when the destined hero or whatever farts beams of light? Well, the answer is, you can't. So the one thing to take away from this whole point I'm trying to make here is that if you like seeking out the weird and insane, this will probably be right up your alley. With that being said though, let's move on to the bad things, which are just rising up on the horizon like a giant, foreboding final boss. You guys ready for this? Got your seatbelts on? Got your taxes filed? Got your tray tables in the upright position? Alright, well then let's go. Take us away, disembodied voice of me. What makes this series bad, you ask? Well, in short, everything. The show may be amusing in its weirdness, but amusing antics will only get you so far if there's nothing to back it up, and this series literally has nothing to back it up. The characters are lousy and stereotypical, the story is a lazy semi-rehash of the original, the animation, despite being done by Madhouse, one of my favorite production companies of all time, looks cheap and basic, the plot progression is broken beyond belief, and just grumble, grumble, grumble. You might say I'm being too hard on it, since it's from 1994 and all that, but I will stop your high horse right in its tracks by telling you that plenty of animated series and movies came before Legend of the Crystals and were significantly higher quality. And also, shut up, 1994 was the year I was born, so it's automatically awesome no matter what you say. One specific point I'd like to make is that the series also has a strange habit of trying to sexualize Lena Lee by constantly showing her panties. Like, literally as much as they possibly can. Okay, first of all, Lena Lee is probably like 14. Second, her skirt is so short it doesn't even count as clothing. It's a napkin she painted blue. And third, just really? You're trying to sexualize her? She looks more like a tutorial on how to draw basic anime characters, not an object of affection. Whatever, I will try to keep my bubbling rage at this series under wraps because I don't want to rant until my kidneys shrivel up, but I just can't believe how shoddy a product this is, coming from a franchise so storied. Yeah, sure, back then Final Fantasy wasn't quite the juggernaut it is now, but it was still popular and worth putting more time and effort into. If there's one thing on this earth I can't forgive, it's unnecessary laziness. Alright, that's enough for that. Now, I know this is the part where I usually talk about my least favorite and my favorite episode, but for this series, I don't have one. There's just nothing that stood out to me at all, so we're just gonna move into Endgame here. Sorry if you wanted to hear what my favorite and least favorite were. I'm sure you're just broken up inside. Final Fantasy Legend of the Crystals is laziness incarnate. Sure, it's not as offensive as 8 Crazy Nights or as boring as the Legend of Zelda cartoon, but it just has this supreme indolence to it where it doesn't try to keep you invested and it doesn't care if you are anyway. It even fails at being an advertisement for the game that it's based off of because it barely mentions a thing about it. It just fails at everything it tries to do, and I give it no quarter in my heart. That was cruel, Jesus. I give Final Fantasy Legend of the Crystals
0 eyes out of 5.
So, Legend of the Crystals. Is it watchable? Well, that depends on what your threshold of pain is. If it's similar to mine, you'll probably be reaching for some sort of gun or knife or pills or something to end your life real quick. Is it enjoyable? Well, like I said, the one solitary enjoyable thing about it is just seeing what kind of weird and crazy shit's gonna happen, but other than that, that's a negatory, good buddy. Is it memorable? Well, let me put it this way. Have you ever heard of it? No? Yeah, that's what I thought. Anyway, thank you for joining me for the first installment of Final February. We got 3 more animated Final Fantasy installments to go, so you're not gonna want to miss it. Now, I have to go to the bathroom, because I think I'm about to shit out beams of light. Bye. With more iterations than hairs on Donald Trump's heads, Donald Trump has multiple heads, making more money than some country's entire yearly GDP, and having something that I can't remember. Want to stay up to date with the latest EyeofSol news? You can follow me on Twitter as well as on Facebook at twitter.com/EyeofSol299 and facebook.com/EyeofSol. I update them every day, so if you want to check out news on the show as well as updates, just follow the links here. Hey everybody, thanks for watching my first installment in this final February month. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, I would appreciate a like or a share and definitely a subscribe to my channel because that makes me smile, it really does. If you want to check out the previous 2 episodes, you can see the annotations playing on the video right now, or if you want to check out my various social media sites, you can see the links to my Twitch channel, Twitter page, and my Facebook fan page. They're on the screen for you, as well as in the description. If you have an idea for an animated series or movie you want me to comment on, you can leave me a message in the YouTube comments, on any one of my social media sites, or just let me know in any way you can think of to let me know what you want to see, and I will add it to my list. I have over 200 unique suggestions now, so it's pretty sweet. Okay, thanks again for watching everybody, and I will see you next week for another Final Fantasy iteration.